Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Welcome to Point of View. This is Nick Pitts, and this is Wednesday, September 13th, 2017, and I'm joined at the round table today by Mr. Kerby Anderson. Kerby, how are you today?
Oh, I'm always good, and it's great to see you in that chair, sitting there and getting ready for another Millennial Round Table today.
Another Millennial Round.
Another one, yes. Here we go.
Spin it back. And so joining us today at the Millennial Round Table is a frequent guest. We've got Grant Skeldon of Initiative Network. Grant, how are you?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Oh, so good. Grant's always so cool, Kerby. I just want to be cool like Grant.
He's just cool, yeah.
I know. He's just a cool guy on this National Peanut Day.
Here we go.
But also in the Pitts household, we know this as Mom's Birthday Eve. And so we have to be very careful and very aware that Mom has great expectations for her birthday. So, but nevertheless, we have a female as well around the round table today. We've got Miss Kristi Krock. Kristi, how are you today?
I'm doing all right. Thank you guys for having me.
So good to have Kristi here. Kristi works with Initiative as well, and so Initiative is just this a millennial network that really is trying to compel and kind of gather millennials to be a force for good within communities, but also to plug into churches. And they've been doing some great work, I guess now for about 2 or 3 years now, Grant?
It'll be 4 years in November.
Goodness.
4 year, a 4-year-old here. How about that? That's great.
Phenomenal.
Impressive.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so tell our audience a little bit about Initiative, Grant. Tell us about where it's got started and what are some of the things that you're doing now?
Yeah, I think the main two things we tend to do is to unite and train up, as well as we educate.
Mm-hmm.
When we first started, it was for young adult Christians in Dallas that just had a heart for changing the city through the culture, whether it's business, education, the arts. But then we started having a lot of older people, which we like to call seasoned leaders, ask us for advice. It would be business leaders that were just trying to figure out how to retain millennials, with the average millennial taking 14 jobs by the time they're 40 on that trajectory. It was really starting to be frustrating. And then there was parents that were just trying to figure out how to raise millennials, and even pastors figuring out how to reach millennials. So we've started to educate a lot and just share the why, instead of having people study millennials kind of like whales, where it's just research and numbers and their migrating patterns that 80% are doing this. Now, we wanted to give some insight into the why behind millennials.
Kerby, I promise not to blow any water on you as of now. I just want you to know.
Don't spout off or anything like that.
I can't promise not spouting off. You should know by now. I'll spout off every now and then. Well, that's great. And so what I'm really interested in, because Grant and I are good friends, and so one of the things I love what Initiative is doing is this program called 72.
Absolutely.
That's very intentional in trying to raise up just this variety of different leaders from various different stratas within the community of Dallas, and really equipping them to be able to be kind of cultural missionaries. Am I right, Kristi?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that term that you have. So talk to us a little bit about 72, Kristi.
Yeah, so 72 is our program where for 7 months we take around 72 young adult leaders, like you said, from all different disciplines, whether that be politics, business, education, family, etc. And for the 7 months, our hope is that we develop in them a culture that is Christ-loving and is city-changing, church-investing, and disciple-making. So really just honestly living in deeper biblical obedience to what it means to be a Christian, and really believing that that's Jesus's model, and then that's how the world changes.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I think, Kerby, one of the things I'm most captivated by is the sense that what Initiative's doing is not trying to train up pastors, even though they're blessing pastors and working alongside pastors, but they're really trying to equip and help individuals be the manifest faithful presence in the circles and spheres where they're at.
Yeah, Grant, I get the sense that you're really kind of coming alongside. Instead of this, I'm the teacher, you're the recipient of all this knowledge, you're really kind of coming alongside and helping people understand what is happening and some of these changing trends in our 21st century.
Yeah, and a big part of it is just if 7 out of 10 young adults are leaving the church, then we have got to return to my opinion is the Acts Church model of evangelism is we can't expect them to come to church to learn. And even though a lot of people think this generation will be a boomerang, that when they get married or when they have kids, they'll come back. But I'm seeing a lot less of that. Like I'm seeing people my generation, friends in my generation that have kids and they don't think, oh, now I need to start going to church. They do seek advice and insight, but it's weird where they'll find it. It's not church. And so we need to go kind of like Jesus. Jesus didn't pick one single religious leader to be one of his disciples. He chose these men and women that were in the marketplace and started to empower and disciple those leaders. But it's not to say that the church is not important. I mean, Paul is a great testimony. If there ever was a guy that should never doubt that Jesus loves you, Jesus came back one more time just for this one guy named Paul.
Line,
and so
line, yes.
It's both and so we just wanted to create a structure to train up not just pastors for the church, but also missionaries for the city.
That's so rich. And so over the next 2 hours on today's program, we're going to be talking about all different things. And so we're going to be talking about Apple's iPhone. And so why is it that our culture is so infatuated with the iPhone? Probably a more personal question. Why do I love the iPhone? I'm already trying to budget to get this 10 thing. But then we're also going to be talking about the movie It, the really scary movie. I'm going to be full frontal with you all and know that I do not like scary movies. Okay.
Same.
There's nothing. The only thing scarier than that scary movie is an empty peanut butter jar, in my mind. And so I'm so fascinated with why our culture is so infatuated with scary movies. And then we're also going to be talking about millennials, and specifically we're going to be looking at why, just trying to think through millennials in the job market. So if you're an individual that works with millennials and you're seeing them hop around, really what are the values that they're accentuating? What are those things that keep them at the jobs that they're at? And then finally, we're going to be talking about free speech on the college campus. And so we're going to be going back to Kirby's old stomping grounds and talking about Berkeley and why during this free speech week that they're going to be having, about how there's trying to be this squelching of speech. And so we're going to be talking about all those things on today's program. So if you want to call in and have a question or a comment relative to millennials or an encouragement, please just send me encouragement. You can call in at 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212. Kirby, before we come up on the break, I'd be really interested. You didn't get a chance, unless you're watching our Facebook feed, which millennials probably are. Unless you're watching our Facebook feed, you didn't. When Grant said that he doesn't think that millennials are going to boomerang back. Mm-hmm. You agreed with that.
Totally,
okay.
Totally.
Can you share some of your thoughts on that?
Well, and one of the reasons is I wrote a book years ago on baby boomers, and now I've been writing on millennials. And the baby boomers, there was a little bit of that boomerang, that the kids would come back like the swallows to Capistrano. But that's because they grew up around church. If you look at the millennial generation, a high percentage of those were not in church in the first place. So this idea of a boomerang presupposes that they were in church in the first example. And so that's the first issue. Number two, if you are a little bit anti-institutional, and haven't we talked about this before? Yeah. Millennials tend to be. The institution of the church isn't necessarily a place where I'm going to go. And then, like I said, there's just this sense that a lot of them have never had a religious experience. I've told the story before, but I'll tell real quickly, since we're coming to a break, of a friend of mine that's been teaching at the Dallas Art Institute. She will take them into various buildings. When they come into a church, more than half of them say, this is the first time I've ever been in a church. Wow. Now think about that. If I've never been in a church, I'm going to think about going back to a church when I was never in a church in the first place. I think you can kind of see there are lots of very good reasons why I don't think the boomerang is going to happen for the millennial generation like it did in part for the baby boom generation.
Wow, we've got so much that we're going to be talking about. So again, if you want to call in, it's 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212, and we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
So often when the threat of North Korea is discussed, we are presented with a false choice. Either we go to war or we do nothing. The latter option has been the hallmark of American interaction for too long. A military strike should be the last resort, but there are other things we can and should do. An acronym used by the National Strategy for Combating Terrorism is DIMEFIL. A recent editorial in the Wall Street Journal fleshed out what could be done in North Korea. D stands for diplomatic. Much more pressure can be put on countries to restrict their ties to North Korea. I stands for information. Defectors are already sending information into North Korea about the outside world. This might encourage some leaders to defect or stage a coup. M stands for military. Building up a missile defense might diminish North Korea's threat of nuclear blackmail. Deploying tactical nuclear weapons to South Korea would make the threat to retaliate against their aggression more credible. E stands for economic. President Trump is considering sanctions against anyone who does business with North Korea. Applying sanctions to some of the networks used by North Korea could curtail their trade. F stands for financial. The U.S. can cut off North Korea's access to financial intermediaries that conduct such transactions. Such sanctions were already applied to a Chinese bank. I stands for intelligence. Under President Bush, the administration intercepted North Korea's weapons exports. And L stands for legal. Human rights abuses are rampant in North Korea. It is time to take the nation to the International Criminal Court. Currently, North Korea is vulnerable to pressure because of a severe drought. These and other pressure points can be a way to bring down this evil regime. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View, and I am Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the round table today by Kerby Anderson, Grant Skeldon, and Kristi Krock. Grant and Kristi being from Initiative, Kerby being from Heaven.
Just I get a different comment from you every week. I'll take that one, though, I think. All right.
But nevertheless, we've got a packed show today. And so we'll be talking about everything from the new iPhone that just was released and the movie It. And why is it that we're flocking to go see this scary movie? Mm-hmm. It makes no sense to me. And then talk about millennials and the job and the marketplace. And what is it that millennials are looking for in a job? And then the free speech. And so, again, we're going to be talking about quite a few things. And we'd love to hear your point of view as well. You can call in at 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212. But Kerby, we have to talk about the Apple release.
There we go. That was yesterday.
So yesterday,
tried not to get distracted yesterday when I was doing the show.
I was completely distracted yesterday and unproductive as I watched the release. And so Apple released, I guess you would say there was 4 different things that Apple released.
We have an 8 and a 10. Where's the 9?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So they've got 2 different 8 models that they released, the 8 and then an 8S, which are very similar from what I understand to the 7, except they have the facial recognition software. You can charge it by just putting it on a table. You've also got, and then you've got the new phone to commemorate 10 years of the iPhone, which is the Apple, it's not Apple X, it's Apple 10, just for our listeners. And so you get the Apple 10, which is just this thing from Star Trek, I guess we could say. And so, and then that's the cellular phone components. And then we've also they're releasing an Apple TV update, which allows 4K streaming of a video quality. And then they've got a new Apple Watch, which allows you to be able to receive phone calls on your phone even if your phone's not close by. I have an Apple Watch right here, and technology is just becoming a part of my person now. And so,
and you
Grant,
can talk on it.
I know I can talk on it like I'm Dick Tracy, which is
extension of yourself.
Yeah, I know. And so, Grant, why are we so infatuated with the iPhone?
I get asked the big question.
Why?
I don't. Okay, it's not a generational thing. I always say everyone loves it, all generations. But I think, I don't know, man. I'm the worst guy to answer this. I'm the guy that does not want to have an Apple Watch, because you guys that have Apple Watches, y'all just cannot. I mean, there's a difference when you just want to check your phone. That thing vibrates, and I know the nicest, kindest, intentional people, when they have the Apple Watch, they're constantly checking their phone. It looks like they're checking the time. And so I just don't want one more way to find out who's emailing me or texting me. And so I'm just I'm like trying to get away from all that right now kind of guy.
Okay, so here's the funny thing. So there's like two sides. So I turn mine on vibrate. So I mean, I don't even feel it when I'm watching, because I try to be as intentional as I can, present in the moment. But then there's also, like, I had a roommate that decided that he was going to get an Apple Watch, because he said, I've actually cut down on how many times I look at my phone, because when I look at my phone, it's never just for an email. Then it turns into a social media excursion.
Okay.
And so I end up going on a safari through Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sure. So, Kristi, help us. Maybe, do you have like a hypothesis as to why we're so infatuated, so enamored with this iPhone?
I think there can be so many components of it, honestly. But the part that I just thought of now is it enables us to do whatever we want to do. We can, if we're uneducated on something, or we're not sure what time the game starts or whatnot, like, we have instant access to the world at our fingertips. And so we don't have to carry as much mental knowledge. We don't have to remember things. Y'all know how often I use the, hey Siri, remind me in 30 minutes to text so-and-so or send this email. That's one of the biggest features I use on my phone. It releases our mental capacity, but also it enables us in different social circumstances to find comfort in situations that are uncomfortable. So like those social interactions where you're in an elevator and you don't really want to have to acknowledge or engage in small talk and whatnot. And so it both like enables us to have access to whatever we need, so we don't need to engage in those more seemingly small interactions.
Yeah, so Sherry Turkle, Reclaiming Conversation, she would said that there used to be a day which technology would connect us one with another, but now it's the very thing that disconnects us. Yeah. So even like to your example, on the way up here, there was someone that was on their phone, but I don't think they were really on their phone. I think they just didn't want to talk to me. So I'm not going to take that personally, but nevertheless, it does remind me, though, that you're right, and that it connects us with an outer world, but rightly disconnects us from this world. Kerby, do you have a hypothesis as to why we're so infatuated with this technology?
Well, the first article you posted here, things Apple's iPhone helped destroy. One of those, of course, is small talk. But I think there is something else. And as the old guy around the table, let me move away from iPhones to get back to it. And that is, when the first time you got a Swiss Army knife, you said it does all these different kinds of things. It's not just a knife, it's a can opener, and it's a corkscrew, and it's all those kinds of things. And even back in the 1950s, and 60s and 70s, it was just a really incredible kind of device because it did all those things. Well, now let's go one generation more. Just think of all the things your iPhone does, and as your article that you posted here, all the things it's destroyed. You don't need a camera now because you have a really good camera on your iPhone. Yeah. I don't even think you have a map in your car anymore, I bet.
No way.
No, not even a chance, because you just use
Where do you buy it? Does Walmart have maps?
We were hearing from Grant that he finally decided to buy an alarm clock, but most of you millennials don't even have an alarm clock because you use your phone to wake you up. Now, he changed that because I think rightly he said, I'm not always going to be with my phone, which I think is a really good idea. But just think about why this is so incredible. It does everything that you need. I don't have to carry a number of encyclopedias because I can just ask Google or Wikipedia for all that information, and maps and cameras, and on and on and on. I think that's why we just love it so much.
Yeah, I think Andy Crouch, one of the things that I'm so captivated by what he says when he speaks to the biblical narrative in iPhones, he says it goes back to the Jesus temptation.
Yes.
To be like God, right? That technology, specifically the iPhone and Apple, allows us the capacity to be able to, 1, know where everybody is, 2, know everything that's going on, and 3, create. which is very much similar temptations to what Jesus faced. And the idea is not necessarily to get rid of the cell phone, but the idea is to limit the cell phone. Of what Philip Yancey, what we've talked about time and again, to be able to put restraints, to put boundaries upon the times that we use phones. Have you found that to be the case, Grant, with you? You've talked about using those boundaries.
Yeah, and I think that Kirby makes a really great point that maybe we should give a little bit more grace to the idea that just things have changed. Now there is one item that can do a lot of things that we did in the past. Because no one, I think, would judge someone 30 years ago for using a map. But now if you're using on your iPhone, that's a little bit more time on your iPhone, or using an alarm clock, or sending emails, or all that. But now if you're writing on a typewriter, but now it's all going to be on your iPhone. What we don't know is what are they doing exactly on their iPhone. And so I just like to limit the morning and I limit the night. I don't want to have it then. I try not to have it when I am with people. And I'm not the best. I don't think people would say I'm the best, because I have 424 text messages right now. And a lot of them...
It's so popular, y'all.
No, it's not because it came today. It's because I'm not a texter. I like phone calls, and I'm huge on the voice messages. So I try to keep it as... This is what it's going to be like in real life, is talking. And so I like to do that as much as possible. I also don't like being typical. And so the more I see people on that, the more I don't want to do it. I've never tried coffee. It's really... Wow. I try to be normal.
There's some character issues here, folks.
We mentioned Andy Crouch. He was on Monday with us on the TechWise family, and he's talked about something. I'd like to hear a millennial response to this, of the idea of a Sabbath. And he's actually said, I think there should be a Sabbath where one day a week you don't have your phone, 1 week a year you don't have your phone. And when he said that, I saw some people just have this look of terror on their faces. But again, the argument he's making is that his kids, until they got a certain age, did not have a TV set in their house, and now it's still in the basement, so it's difficult to get to. And if we're going to raise a counterculture generation, Grant, don't you think we have to rethink some of the ways in which we use technology?
Absolutely. And I mean, one way even... I'm a big fan of the dinner table. I think I've shared this here possibly before, but I think Tony Evans' kids are unbelievably godly in all the different ways and directions they went. And when I got to ask him what does he think credited to that, he said the table. And he said, we did dinner all the time, breakfast. And he said, even to this day, as busy as all my kids are, I don't even live in the same state. Some of them live in California. Once a month, we still do dinner at the table. And so one thing I've started to add, I'm actually doing a retreat next weekend. We do even an initiative where we say make a phone mountain, and it's like everyone puts their phone on top of here, and whoever gets it has to pay for appetizers or a dessert that we share. And so there's some cost. And it's so funny. We were in South Africa 2 months ago, and people they're like, oh, it comes up in conversation, like who did this or that? And they're like, oh, let me look at, and then they don't realize they don't have their phone. They want to grab it. They're like, oh crap, I don't want to buy the appetizers. And so it's just so in us that we have to grab that thing for so many things.
That's so good. So we're going to continue talking about the iPhone technology and what are some ways in which we can limit kind of some of its capacity, but also just be blessed by a lot of its opportunities as well. And so if you'd like to call in with your point of view, you can call in at 800-351-1212, and we'll be back right after this.
At dinner recently, I was struck by the couple in front of me. They were allegedly spending a night out together, but the only time they communicated in a half hour was one time when the man showed what was on his phone to the woman, and then back to their own screens. We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You'll find us online with your phone, your tablet, your laptop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues. You can also follow our new YouTube video series, Uncensored. Stay informed. Follow us on Twitter at Point of View RTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Again, at Point of View RTS. We'd love you to retweet us, to share our Facebook posts, but please don't do it when you're out with your family or someone you love. We can wait. We're online 24 hours a day. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back to Point of View on this Wednesday, September 13th, 2017 day. We've been talking about the iPhone, and we're joined at the round table today by Kerby Anderson, Grant Skeldon of Initiative, as well as Kristi Krock, and we're trying to figure out not only the component of the infatuation, what causes us to be so enamored with this iPhone, but what are some limits that we can put on the iPhone in order to be able to benefit from the goodness of it, but also not to become enslaved to it. And so, Kristi, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was actually driving home yesterday, and there's this kid walking home from school, probably like 7th grade boy. And the entire time, I walk him down the whole road, the entire time he's looking at his phone down. And I just realized, man, us as millennials can be so like infatuated with our phones, but just how much more will it be perpetuated for future generations? Mm-hmm. And realizing when I was that age, walking home was a time to like think about the day, to like decompress, to process what's happened, to think about how I feel about things or what I have to do whenever I get home. And so really for me, as far as boundaries and limitations on iPhones, is I need to make sure that I'm having time to process my life. Mm-hmm. Because the temptation can be, I don't have to get into like the hard work of thinking through how I'm feeling, how my workday went, how that conversation was. I can just instantly be entertained and my mind can keep going in a way that it doesn't have to be active, but very, very passive, for a long time. Whereas really like the emotionally healthy route is to have time to decompress and to think on what's going on in your life. And really those are moments that the Lord speaks to you as well. So
I kind of had the same situation about 2 weeks ago. there was I don't remember what exactly it was, but I had an expectation and it didn't happen, and it was just really disappointing. And I remember thinking, it was late at night. It wasn't like I could call friends and go hang out and talk to them. And I thought, I'm just going to watch a movie. And I think that social media or just access to anything now online through your phone can numb your current situation.
Yeah.
And I actively chose, because I knew what I was doing, like I was processing it, and I could decide numb and then go to sleep, or process it. And I decided to read the word. And I really feel like that's the last thing I don't want to say your conscience, but your flesh wants to do. But I remember afterwards, I've never read the Bible extensively and thought that was a waste of time. I've always read and thought I should do this more often.
Yeah.
And so I just told myself after that, you need to fight the urge to numb and go into the word, or just even going on a walk for me a lot of times clears my mind a lot. And truth starts to speak into my mind.
Yeah, it's fascinating, Kirby, just some of the studies that are coming out that indicate, there's always been the case that we can watch TV when we go to bed at night. We can read a book when we go to bed at night. But what researchers are saying is it's largely passive. You are a passive participant in that, and you are just you're being subject to the action that's taking place. Whereas what's different with the iPhones and with technology in general is you're an active participant in that. You are moving from thing to thing. You're interacting with people. You're talking. So we're seeing that there's upwards of individuals are losing 30 minutes of sleep a night because they're really just they can't slow down, Kirby.
Well, again, it is an interactive medium, which is better because we all know the phenomenon of TV zombies, where you just sit back and watch and you're not participating.
Yeah.
Like a video game or like a smartphone, you're participating in it. But I want to come back to what Kristi had to say. There's no downtime anymore. And whether you look at some of the studies that have now made their way to the various TED Talks, I'm a real TED Talk addict, love TED Talks, or back at Dallas Seminary where I've taught before, Howard Hendricks wrote a whole book on creativity. All of them are saying the same thing. We've lost creativity.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because there's no downtime. There's no think time. Years ago, I taught a Bible study, and everybody in that Bible study was in advertising or art. And to a person, they said that some of their most creative times, some of the best ad campaigns came either when they were in the shower, or when the men were shaving, or when the women were putting on makeup, or when they were driving. In other words, when you had that downtime, that chance to let your mind kind of just in a free-form way make some connections. And now you go into a typical teenager's bedroom, and it's like a 24/7 news operation because they are always on the phone, they're on the computer, they're interacting to Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it might be. And I think this loss of creativity in large part has to do with the advent of technology that's come into our lives.
Yeah, it was funny. Just during the break, we had someone that came in, and I was trying to look up how much storage is actually on my iPhone, so to figure out what it would look like if I were to have to purchase, what would I need? And I was need and want probably are two different things. I probably need to clarify in that component. And I was very discouraged as I saw this devices that were connected to my Apple ID. I was like, my goodness, Apple owns my soul.
Yes, it really does. But again, and Google knows what you're doing too.
Yeah, I assume if I get on a computer or I get on some technological device, everybody can see what I'm doing. But I think that's just a good rule of thumb. But I think you bring up something really good, and Kirby, and I'd love to hear Grant's perspective on that. Just within for the millennial, if they're not able to kind of foster that imagination, right? Because I think imagination is one of those key components of the Christian life, to be able to imagine what the world should be instead of what it is, to be an active participant in making His kingdom come, His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What do you think millennials can be doing, or what do you think millennials are doing in order to foster that imagination in today's world?
I mean, I do think that social media, I don't know what they are doing. I don't hear many good stories, unfortunately. I do think that we are learning as we go as an entire humanity of the effects of all this. And so when she was sharing the story about the kid walking, I was thinking, the kid walking on his phone doesn't know that 20 years ago we didn't do that. Like for our generation, what grade did you get a phone in?
I was in 8th grade.
So I was in 7th grade.
Yeah.
And so what about you, Kristi?
7th.
7th. And so for these kids, they don't know that wasn't normal. It's just going to be what they have. And so all that to say is I think that they'll get to learn a little bit from us how to regulate and be intentional with it. I just have my times like at the table, try to not have it, especially if it's with community. And I think there's this common theme we keep talking about, that you need to use a phone or it owns your soul because you have all these things tied to it. And that's okay. I don't think we should have shame because we're on our phone. But when we're around people, we shouldn't have it as much as we do.
Yeah, we're missing out, right, Kristi? Like I think about one Fairfield University study that said that, I don't know, whenever I go to a concert, it's just so prevalent to see people take pictures. And what they say is that, according to the Fairfield study, that individuals that took pictures often forget the moments and forget the experiences, but they still have the picture. And so I feel like we're missing out on so much right now by trying to capture it.
Yeah, absolutely. I recently got engaged, and one of the conversations that we've had, thanks, pumped, is that we feel like our phones can often distract us from the people right in front of us and the people that we even care about most at times. And so y'all touched on our alarm clocks earlier, and that's something that we've discussed is like, hey, maybe our room would be a technology-free zone. And so whenever we were there, we weren't intentionally on those devices, whatever that may be, just to foster better communication and time with one another. So
that's really good. That's really good. Again, just placing limits on it. I think in our society today, it's very easy to have the false dichotomy, Kerby, that you can either be all for it or all against it. Yeah. And in reality, I think there is a middle way that we can move forward.
Yeah, false choices. And again, we mentioned some of the things that we've talked about on this program, both on the Millennial Round Table and even earlier this week with Andy Crouch, just thinking through the impact that this technology is having on you. And if you want to have more think time, if you want to have more creativity, if you want to have better relationships with other individuals, I think you just have to be somewhat proactive. And that's one of the things we've talked about so often here on Point of View.
Yeah, I think, again, the studies, I think, indicate are pretty clear indication that technology does have the propensity to hinder connectivity one with another. A study out of Drexel University even went so far as to be able to say that the presence of a smartphone hinders cognitive functions. So it even hinders your thinking. And so I think it's just really important to put those limits.
Okay, so why do you think that is? Because I don't think anyone's listening to this thinking, man, iPhones are really making us more creative or focused and all of that. But we still don't do an inventory on our lives.
So I think about it whenever I'm doing writing or researching. If I know that I have my phone anywhere within visible eyesight, I typically will look over there because there's the phantom feels, right? Good. Like I'm thinking that it's vibrating. I'm thinking that it's lighting up. And I'm a slow guy, so I almost failed kindergarten. I did fail driver's test, and so
don't you have your doctorate?
But that's beside the point. So I'm a slower guy, so I know that I've got to have uninterrupted thought to be able to process all these various strata, to synthesize them together, to make a particular point or make a persuasive argument. And I know just even the presence of my phone distracts me and keeps me from that undistracted thought. And so I think it's just really important for us just to, again, not to throw it away, but just to put it within limits, which I think can be really beneficial. So when we come back, we're going to be talking about scary movies, and I am not happy about that. And so we'd love to hear your point of view. You can call in at 800-351-1212. We'll be back after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Since 2012, First Liberty Institute has been investigating the rise in the number and severity of domestic attacks on religion. Each year, that investigation is compiled into our annual survey. We started that survey because wherever we went, people would tell us that they didn't think there was a genuine threat to religious liberty in our country. We call it Undeniable, the Survey of Religious Hostility to Religion in America. In the past year, the total number of documented attacks on religious liberty has increased by over 15%. Over the past 5 years, we have seen an alarming 133% increase. Of the 1,400 cases documented in Undeniable, you will see a myriad of faiths represented: Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and Sikh, among others. Religious hostility in America does not seem to discriminate. But there is hope. First Liberty is battling for religious freedom in court, but you can join that fight by simply educating yourself and others about the rights we each have and how we can preserve them. If you haven't yet, I'd encourage you to go to firstliberty.org today and download your copy of the 2017 edition of Undeniable, or order a free copy for your friend. Despite the mounting hostility, First Liberty is prepared to stand against these relentless attacks for as long as it takes. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Guide at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View, and I'm joined today by Kerby Anderson, Grant Skeldon, and Kristi Krock are on the round table. And so we've been talking about the iPhone, and I can get all on board with the iPhone, Kerby. Like, I'm all about the iPhone. It can be about my iPad. It can be about my MacBook. It can be about my infatuation with my Apple Watch. But I am not a scary movie guy.
Not exactly.
Not a scary movie guy at all. And so I don't. It's very interesting what's happening right now at the movie theater. And so what we're saying is that we're coming out of a summer season in which there was it was a less than desirable, less than stellar box office. And so some were saying that that's largely because the movie quality. Others were saying that it's largely because just individuals just didn't want to go to the theaters this year because there were so many other offerings that were happening. But then we have this movie, It, that comes in and is just breaking every box office record. And so I don't know if you're familiar with It. It is the scary movie about Pennywise, I guess, is just that little child that has makeup. And then we're wondering, how can this child function the way that it does? And then why is it wearing so much makeup? So are you all scary movie people around the round table?
Absolutely not.
No, not a scary movie person. Grant, are you?
A little, barely.
Yeah.
Recently, just after seeing Get Out, I thought that was such a brilliant scary movie.
Okay.
Like, it wasn't just, I was telling her in the car ride over here, when I think of scary movies, I think of Paris Hilton being in it. And I'm like, she's not an actor or an actress. Like, it was always low quality budget and low quality actors. But then I started to realize there are movies like The Shining with Jack Nicholson or Anthony Hopkins or Kevin Spacey. And so Get Out, I just thought that was so well done. I had not seen many movies like that. So I've started to watch a couple if they're what I would call sophisticated horror.
Okay.
But not most scary movies are Sharknado. You will not catch me watching that.
That's great. So, Kerby, are you a scary movie person?
I am not. But, we had Rick Stedman on this program recently. He's a pastor, wrote a book on 31 arguments for the existence of God, and they're obscure ones. And he talks about the fact, and this comes from research that was done about 17 years ago, on why is it in a secular society where we reject God, who would have even guessed that we would want to go to a movie to learn about a Jedi Knight or some individual that has spider powers, if indeed we're becoming a more secular society? And the argument that he makes in the book, which is citing a lot of secular research, is that we have this desire for the supernatural, so we're really fascinated by that. So he says, first of all, the reason that some of these fantasy movies work so well is because they actually meet a need that a lot of people have pushed out of their lives. Then the other part of that is horror films. Again, we recognize there's good and evil, but we can't use the word evil, but we can actually go to a movie and see evil and know that it's evil. And then, of course, we know the physiological study. There was a study done at Purdue, which basically told us what we already know, and that is when you watch a scary movie, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, and it creates what they call an excitation transfer. So there are some physiological reasons, but back to the point I made just a minute ago, I think, are some spiritual reasons. People who have bushed out the idea of God, the supernatural, and everything else, there is an eternity set in the hearts of every individual, it says in the book of Ecclesiastes. And I think we still are trying to fill up that God-shaped vacuum with something, and we do it with fantasy films and maybe with horror films.
That's really good. That's a great point. Like, we think about the transcendentals and how they've been absent from our culture today. The truth, the beauty, and the goodness are largely absent from kind of the public square today. And I think that there really is that point. I think about millennials specifically, Grant. There's a book out, Nothing to Be Afraid of, by Julian Barnes, and he has this telling quote in there that says, "I don't believe in God, but I miss him." And it's this outright rejection, but there is this longing that Kerby was talking about, the Augustinian understanding of our heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee. Do you think that the millennials, because again, millennials are largely still going to the movie theater. They account for about 29% of the movie going populace. And so do you think that could be a reason why millennials are flocking to theaters, flocking to go see movies like It?
Yeah, I think that movies and music help us as a generation, and maybe more than ever, and I'm not saying this is right, I just think it's real, is that I think movies and music really help young people cipher through emotions and feelings, and even theology, if you will, of just life. I mean, how much we joke about how romantic movies shape the way we see love. I think a lot of movies shape the way, like, this is what it looks like to be a man. This is what it looks like to be a woman. This is what it looks like to be attractive or to get a girl, whatever it may be, even to be a father and husband that aren't realities. But one thing that you said, Kerby, that I thought was really interesting is that desire to watch the horror or the power or the fantasy. There is also a huge rise for the good too, and I think maybe that is the missing God that you talk about in comic books. Like the top 10 movies that will come out this year, there'll be a handful of them that will be comic book movies and superhero movies that wasn't the truth 20 or 30 years ago, but superhero movies are dominating like box offices in today's age, and so I think that speaks to the desire for a savior or a hero also.
You know, right now we are celebrating the 80th anniversary of a series written by J.R.R. Tolkien, which if you had told me even 20 years ago that would be made into film and that those films would be international successes, I would think that you lost your mind. And then if you told me that not only were they international successes, but they were nominated for an Academy Award, I would have said there is not a chance. And yet again, there is this struggle between good and evil, temptation. Tolkien has all sorts of rich, transcendental themes in that. And that was written 80 years ago, and these books are still as popular as they were when he wrote them, perhaps even more so.
And I guess just to make the conversation go full circle as we're kind of coming up on a close is to understand that these are largely individuals that utilize their imagination to create these stories of a different place. Now, I don't know how much technology played in kind of their creativity process, but I would say that they are producing something that is very captivating, and beauty often is known as alluring. Beauty never forces itself, but rather is allured. And so do you think, Kristi, do you think that millennials are kind of flocking to movies? They're going to see those It's because it really is, in a very relativistic world, there is kind of these boundaries. There's these absolutes that are being put forward in movies.
I do think that movies often give absolutes, whereas the world is a lot more ambiguous on them. And so it can become an idealized picture of those things. I do also think that, as you touched on earlier, like, and Grant, you even touched on it, you talking about how our phones can numb us. Scary movies are a place, like, we feel when we're in a scary movie, we feel very alive. We're very in the know of what's going on in our bodies with our heart rate and the goosebumps
I
and
know.
whatever else.
I know. I am not in a good place if I am in a scary movie. If you ever see me in a scary movie, I have been kidnapped. And so call 911. And so there was a great little piece in Vanity Fair that talked about how it was so captivating and why it's raking in so much money in the box office is because of that communal fear aspect. Yeah. There's the sense that we can't, in a Netflix generation, we can watch a scary movie at home, but watching a scary movie in the theater, everyone's shrieking at the same time, you feeling the tension. The tension is so palpable in that theater. It's captivating, and it creates a different type of experience, right, Grant?
Yeah, actually in the Tipping Point, they did a study where they had a crowd of like 5 people. You know, when you go in the movie theater, put your feet on, because no one's in there. And then a crowd it's packed, watch the same exact movie. And they actually had a different experience and would grade the movie differently based on community. So I think millennials will always want to watch movies at theaters because it is a communal experience, not just obtaining information.
Yeah, I think about Avatar, right? And so I saw Avatar in theaters, and when I saw it at home, it was radically different. And by radically different, I mean I was on my phone the entire time because I was bored to death. But it was different when I was actually in theaters because it was really good. And I was with a lot of people. And so, but nevertheless, we're going to be back, and you'll be back with us after this little break. And so be sure to check out us, and then we'll be talking about millennials in the workplace right after this.
Would you like to be above average or exceptional? I'll explain how you can be in a moment. What do you think about change? Some people love it, others not so much. I'm guessing you agree our culture needs change, but how will that happen? Change happens with you and your influence. If each of us does our part, God can change the culture through us. That's a goal at Point of View, to help you change things around you. We never charge for the information we deliver each day, but that information is not free. There is a significant cost in getting it to you. You know who helps us do that? About 1 out of every 800 listeners to Point of View. So you can be above average. You can be exceptional by visiting pointofview.net and clicking the banner Change Happens with You, or by calling 1-800-347-5151. Thank you for being exceptional by supporting Point of View. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome to Point of View on this Wednesday, September 13th, 2017 day. I am joined in the Millennial Round Table by the king of millennials, Kerby Anderson. Kerby, how are you?
I'm good.
So good, so good. And we're also joined by Grant Skeldon and Kristi Krock of the Initiative Network. How are y'all doing?
Good. We're the jesters.
The jesters. But jesters do oft prove as prophets, as Shakespeare would say.
Very good line. Good line.
So,
I told Kristi, I said, this guy could quote anything, like anything and everything, so be ready.
Yeah, Dumb and Dumber. We were talking about movies during the break, and if you joined us during the first hour, we were talking about everything from the iPhone and our infatuation to the iPhone, as well as to we kind of ended the last hour talking about It and how this scary movie It is just with Pennywise. It's just captivated audiences. It's breaking box office records, and we were talking about everything. Kerby illuminated a great point in the sense that it really does appeal to that sense of those mystical, those fantasy tales really do kind of point to the restless heart that we all have, yearning for God, and then also that sense of communal fear as well. But I also wanted to, since it's National Peanut Day, I also wanted to bring in a telephone call that I found out that we have. And so Skeldon is calling in from Georgia. Skeldon, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hey,
how you doing?
Doing well, sir. Whereabouts in Georgia are you?
Southeast Georgia, south of Jessup, between Waycross and Savannah.
Okay. So, okay, very neat. So you had a comment that you wanted to share.
Yes, sir. I don't have TV. I don't want it no more. And I got a $15 flip phone from Walmart.
I love it.
I cannot imagine anybody. You know, I heard this morning they got the new iPhone or whatever it is, and it's going to be $1,000 and be facial recognition. I cannot imagine anybody paying $1,000 for a phone.
You will be disappointed. There will be lots, unfortunately, that will, like it or not.
And listen, Mr. Nick Pitts, is it right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. If you want some more peanut butter now, instead of playing with all them gadgets, do like I do. I grow okra, tomatoes, peppers, squash. You know.
So Skeldon,
Get you a little piece of dirt now and grow you some peanuts.
Okay, so Skeldon,
boil you some.
Okay, so Skeldon, I'm from Tennessee originally, so I have many memories of spending nights with some friends that were on tobacco farms, and so working the tobacco fields.
Lord.
And I would not wish that upon my worst enemy.
Yeah, but peanuts you can eat. You ain't supposed to smoke tobacco, you know.
Well, no comment, Skeldon. No comment. Thanks so much for calling in, Skeldon. No, that's a great call. That's some hard work right there. Farming is such hard work, and so grateful for the farmers, and definitely grateful for Skeldon and peanut farming, because I wouldn't have my peanut butter if that wasn't the case.
That's right.
But yeah, it's so interesting. I want to circle back to what we were talking about with scary movies and that sense of community. We touched upon it last, and I really think that there's some more to this, especially from the millennial standpoint. So Grant, I'm going to be really interested in this. Why do you think millennials, or what is it about the sense of community that it really does draw millennials? Millennials are so yearning for that community, right?
Yeah, I think angst is a word that I like a lot. And I think it's a word that a lot of young adults are looking for. It's what movies are made of. I think when I like a worship song, which is, I'm not going to say it's rare because I don't like worship. It's just a lot of times they don't have angst. I remember Eugene Peterson doing an interview with Bono, and Bono saying, one of my issues with Christian music is it lacks honesty. And so I think when you're honest with the Lord, it sounds a lot more like the Psalms where it's up and down, and we usually just have the up kind of worship songs. And so I think it's not just community, it's community around angst or adventure or risk. It's what this generation really wants. But although we're actually a lot of times risk averse, we can at least find that together in movies.
Yeah. Kristi, what are your thoughts on millennials and community? I'd be really interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think that for me, my parents didn't have the best community. They were involved in church, but they didn't have like a super knit group of close friends. And along with the technology that does connect us and disconnect us, essentially it can be hard to find a place where you're really deeply known. And so community is a place where there are people that will like you and care for you. But also and millennials are very, very experiential. And so community is a place to enhance experiences. Like I love adventuring and figuring out new places of town and whatnot, but I enjoy it way less when I am by myself. And so having people around both enhances an experience, but also provides that just needed knownness through life to be able to be known and loved.
That's really good. Kerby, just thinking about that for a second, like community, there's always been that sense of community, like desire for it, right? We have Bohemia and kind of some of these, what was popularized during Rent, during the kind of boomer generation. But
Very true.
But there's just something different about this. I guess you could say that there used to be a day that familiarity bred contempt, where there wasn't that transparency that was a previous generation was characterized by. But now there's more of this transparency as king, sense that I really do want to be known and I want everybody to know everything.
Yes. And part of it is just the natural reality that community breaks down very easily because of our sin nature, and we're in a broken world. But at the same time, I think if there is anything that your millennial generation figures out, it's falseness, fakeness, lack of authenticity. And so I think there's a desire more than ever in your generation to look for people that are vulnerable, authentic, dedicated, those kinds of things. And so that's certainly one trend. But it's also countermanded, as we've talked about before, because you present the best picture of you on Facebook and the best profile of you on Tinder, since we talked about that last week and those kinds of things. And so as a result, you've got these two contradictory things happening almost simultaneously in your generation.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and call that fake news, y'all. Just kidding. Just kidding. But Kerby hits on a really good point in the sense that there is that yearning for community, one, but also that sense that community can be very false if it's not really a true sense of community that we do have, and that sense of longing. I think about it from a contextual perspective, Kerby, of just knowing that this generation has grown up and everything is falling apart around us, right? The rate of divorce was at a high when many of us were in those formative stages. The world has always been at war right now because all we've known is Iraq and Afghanistan. The church has always been a place that's been plagued by very public scandal. There's always been the Enrons that have been happening in the sense that there's just, whether it was the barbarians at the gate in the 80s or in the 90s, the Enron, or what we're continuing to see with even this Equifax kind of hacking, there's always just been this sense that we really can't trust, and there's brokenness, and we want to be very intentional to find people that we can trust and people we can circle around. And so it's just very interesting, this desire for community. And then what we see with the movies, to circle it all the way back, is that it allowed individuals to come in and to be scared together and to experience that together, which is just such a rich experience, despite the fact of being very scary. Despite the fact. That will be one experience I don't have.
I got a good question. I just want like the number one. Oh my God.
Okay,
next time.
We'll get back to your question after we get to this
cliffhanger.
break.
I love those.
Big cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So
You'll have
call
to
in
stay
with
tuned.
your question if you have it at 800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
So often when the threat of North Korea is discussed, we are presented with a false choice. Either we go to war or we do nothing. The latter option has been the hallmark of American interaction for too long. A military strike should be the last resort, but there are other things we can and should do. An acronym used by the National Strategy for Combating Terrorism is DIMEFIL. A recent editorial in the Wall Street Journal fleshed out what could be done in North Korea. D stands for diplomatic. Much more pressure can be put on countries to restrict their ties to North Korea. I stands for information. Defectors are already sending information into North Korea about the outside world. This might encourage some leaders to defect or stage a coup. M stands for military. Building up a missile defense might diminish North Korea's threat of nuclear blackmail. Deploying tactical nuclear weapons to South Korea would make the threat to retaliate against their aggression more credible. E stands for economic. President Trump is considering sanctions against anyone who does business with North Korea. Applying sanctions to some of the networks used by North Korea could curtail their trade. F stands for financial. The U.S. can cut off North Korea's access to financial intermediaries that conduct such transactions. Such sanctions were already applied to a Chinese bank. I stands for intelligence. Under President Bush, the administration intercepted North Korea's weapons exports. And L stands for legal. Human rights abuses are rampant in North Korea. It is time to take the nation to the International Criminal Court. Currently, North Korea is vulnerable to pressure because of a severe drought. These and other pressure points can be a way to bring down this evil regime. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View for the Millennial Round Table on this Wednesday, September 13th, 2017. Joined at the round table by Kristi, Krock, Grant Skeldon, and Kerby Anderson. And I know everyone's been waiting with rapt attention the question that Grant has. And yes, Grant, the one and only barbecue is pork barbecue. Just in case individuals were wondering, he was wondering about the type of what's the true barbecue. No, just kidding. Grant, what was your question?
My big question is, one, it is so big, like historically, it's like the movie our parents are afraid of. They like get chills of, and so it had a lot of anticipation. And it just made me think: did it make clowns scary, or were clowns always scary? Because if clowns have always been scary, why in the world would the largest food chain in the world choose a clown as its mascot with McDonald's?
Yeah, I find clowns to be scary. But then again, what I have been likened to a cat, and then I'm a scaredy cat. It's not just because I can't grow facial hair and I just grow whiskers on my cheeks, so I'm like jump nimbly blimbly from branch to branch. No, I found clowns to be super scary. I don't understand why they're children's mascots.
I don't think I found them scary when I was young, but do y'all remember seeing it in the news where clowns were popping up everywhere and like walking down the streets and chasing
dangerous.
People?
Yeah.
I haven't heard about that in a while.
Yeah, I'm glad.
That's
I'm
not
glad
okay.
It's not a part of it. Yeah. So here's the thing. Here's just how different. And then we're going to take this call from Pamela here in a second. But I just have to share this. So I was in a fraternity in college, and so we would perform these like philanthropic weeks. There would be these things, and one of the days of the week would inevitably be some skit that you would have to perform. Well, we tried to recreate this series of movies, and so my brother My brother is the exact opposite of me. He is smarter than I am. He is shorter than I am. And he is very introverted. So he's just very different than I am. But what Ryan did, he dressed up as Pennywise. And it was so funny because he scared the entire auditorium because he's shorter. So he did the whole face paint. He did the whole little suit, and he rode in on this tricycle in the back of the auditorium. It was it was the best. It was just the best. It was the best. Only Rhino could pull that off. But nevertheless, that's Scary Movie. So we're gonna keep on talking, and we're gonna take one of those phone calls. And so we've got Pamela here. Pamela, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Pamela, how are you?
I'm doing good. Just came off of teaching 200 students today.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, Pamela, tell us, what's your point of view? What question do you have?
Well, I was listening to the first segment there where you were all talking about the sense of longing and that kind of thing. And my question was to the group that to know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if they have had any instruction on that or have had any education on that type of psychology, I guess, or thinking.
Yeah. I've always been fascinated with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so to kind of paint a picture with words of what for our listeners. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is kind of shaped into like a pyramid, and so there's just those basic survival needs that are at the base of the pyramid. Like I'm always going to operate to try to get food. I'm always going to operate to try to live. And then once I meet some of those basic needs, it's going to allow me to be able to move up the pyramid in order to meet more needs. And so kind of the top need, if I'm right, is self-actualization, of just this sense of being what we would consider from a Christian standpoint, of being able to consider the spiritual component to life, the eternal questions of what is the purpose of life. But the only way that I can ask some of those questions is if my stomach's full, if I have a roof over my head, if I've got a job where I'm getting money. Am I leaving anything out, Kirby?
No, and I think that gets back to the horror films a little bit, or any of the kinds of films, if you think about it, because if you're at that level where you're just trying to survive, there's no way you can enjoy any of the kind of entertainment we're talking about. But when you get to that higher level, then there's that nagging kind of angst that's still there. To use a different illustration, I can feed our dogs and our cats, and I don't know what cat contentment looks like, but the cats and the dogs look pretty content, when I meet their physical needs. You meet the physical needs of human beings, and they roam this planet looking for more, because after all, there's eternity set in the hearts of every individual. So back to my thesis, I think whether it's these fantasy films or whether it's these horror films, it meets kind of a need because we have the sense that there's more to life than life. And when you are at that top pyramid of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think you are more looking for the spiritual than you were if you're just in subsistence level. So I think there's maybe an answer to some of that.
Yeah, Grant, agree with me, disagree with me, argue with me about this. And so I'm just thinking about this based upon Pamela's question. I know the statistics that would say that millennials are underemployed and unemployed. Now, I know the statistics that many millennials are living back at home with their parents right now. This is the most in history of individuals that are within the 21 to 25-year-old range that are living at home with their parents right now. It's numbers around 30-something million.
Yeah.
And so what is the reason why millennials are leaving the church or not as spiritual because they haven't had those felt physical needs in Maslow's hierarchy? Do you think that's do you think that could be a contributing factor as to why they're not participating in some of these religious services?
I actually think maybe the opposite, and that they've had all those needs and not much pressure to. They don't maybe know what it feels like to not have those needs met.
Yeah.
And so when you haven't had those needs met, you want, and you see people that have, you want what they have.
Yeah.
And you have this like strong desire in you. Almost like I find that a lot of times in even specifically young men that didn't have a father, that want to be the kind of man that they wish they had as a father. And so I think that helps a lot. I would say why maybe unemployment or I remember a couple of years, it was 26 million sleeping at home with mom and dad. Now I guess it's around 30 million. So just increasing more and more. I think it's a lack of intentionality in college. I think it's trying to buy into the experience of college instead of the the goal of college is to get a job. And so be intentional with exposing yourself to the same leaders that are doing what you want to do. And I think it is also finding mentors. And I think, I just think it is trying not to be in class only and around experiences on college campus, but be around those who are doing the work that you want to do, because we got to continually remind ourselves that's what college is designed for, is to launch you into a better job.
Kristi, what are you thinking over there?
I'm actually reminded, I was talking to a girl that's a little bit younger than me recently, and she was talking about how she just has a desire to grow. She's about 20, and just really recognizing that a lot of the people that she right now spends a lot of time with are good people, like love God, but aren't also pursuing growth. And just how she was unsure what to do in that situation, because she realized, if I stay where I'm at, I will be the same person 5 years from now that I am today. And so thinking on just what Grant said about you buy into the experience of college, it's a really good way to say it. I think a lot of people do enter into that focus and look at college as the end all and be all in some respects. Anyway, so just along those lines is kind of where my mind.
Kerby, I'm just really interested in this understanding, because I know that I can argue it either way, and so I just want to hear your thoughts.
You could too.
Yeah, because there's that sense that millennials are having their needs met. We talked about it last week.
Right.
That study out of Forbes that indicated that parents are still paying their millennial children $6,800 a year.
There it is.
And so there's the sense that millennials are having their felt needs met, but there's also the sense that they're underemployed. There's still some needs that are keeping them from being able to contemplate those good eternal questions.
Yeah, and I'm like you. I can see it both ways. I can see exactly what Grant's saying, that maybe they had too many needs met, and in other cases they don't have enough. And maybe it's where they think their needs might be met. Just think this as an analogy. Imagine you're really hungry for a hamburger, or you're really hungry for a steak, and the first restaurant you go to is vegan, and the next restaurant you go to is vegetarian. You're going, okay, this meets, but it doesn't meet the needs I'm looking for. There's a sense right now that I think for a lot of individuals that are not Christians, they have this desire for some kind of spiritual encouragement. They're maybe even call themselves spiritual, but they don't think that going to the church is going to meet that need any more than if I'm looking for a steak, going to a vegetarian restaurant is going to help me out. And so that may be the problem, is that they have this desire, and it's manifesting itself in all sorts of ways, but they just don't think that they're going to be spiritually fed when they go to church. And this is why, again, we can't expect them to come to church. We need to figure out ways to go to them and build some bridges that aren't really being built right now.
That's really good, except for the fact that you said I'm hungry and I'm in a vegan restaurant. I think Kerby is trying to tell us a scary movie. To circle back. So when we come back, we're gonna be talking about, we're gonna continue to talk about millennials in the workforce. And if you want to go to the website pointofview.net, there's a great the third article that's listed. We're going to be talking about a little bit more about millennials in the workplace. And so we'll be back right after this.
Point of View turned life right side up for Emily's children. Emily listens in Illinois. She and her husband blissfully sent their children off each day to what she called our small, quaint public school, until Point of View led them to watch the documentary Indoctrination. She said, "We came to realize the need for us to educate our children at home. We want their education to be built on the solid foundation of Scripture." Emily said that would not have happened were it not for Point of View's bold consistency of shining light on public education. Your support for Point of View changes the future for children like Emily's. It leads people to start schools and ministries and businesses that change lives. How has the Truth Team impacted you? Please invest to bring truth to other families like Emily's. Support Truth today. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And we are back on Point of View, and I am Nick Pitts. I'm joined on at the Millennial Round Table by Kerby Anderson, Grant Skeldon, and Kristi Krock of Initiative Network. And we've been talking about all sorts of things about millennials specifically. And so we've got a couple of phone calls that we're going to take. And we've been talking about movies specifically, movies and media. And so we're going to take, we'll take Jim from Oklahoma. Jim, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Jim, what's your point of view? What question do you have?
Well, you guys are talking about movies and, and horror movies and danger and stuff like that from the movies and whatever. I find it hard to believe that people think that movies are real. I used to fly a single-engine Cessna from Canada to Costa Rica and everywhere in between, and people would say, oh, boy, that must be dangerous. And I said, boy, some of this stuff. But you see people on motorcycles doing absolutely idiotic things, and then the little things on YouTube, people that think, you just can't believe that people, can think that that's interesting or real life to me. I just find it beyond my poor powers to add or detract.
Jim, I completely agree with you in the sense that I know that I am not Jason Statham, and so I am not going to be able to have the driving capacity of a Jason Statham, or I know I'm not Charles Lindbergh and can't fly. Contra to R. Kelly, I don't believe I can fly. So we'll continue on. Let's continue with this media theme, and we've got Sarah in North Carolina. Sarah, are you there?
I am. Thank you for taking my call.
Hey, Sarah, whereabouts in North Carolina are you?
I'm on the coast, very small community that's a tourist area primarily. It's in the central coast of North Carolina.
Oh, great. So, Sarah, what's your point of view?
Well, I have a question for you, and it's kind of a point of view. My point of view is that it seems that we have an awful lot of propaganda going on that people aren't even realizing that they're being swayed. And my question is, do you have recommendations for reliable news sources and guidelines for determining what's reliable? I recently had a online little bit of an interchange with a millennial who is in the psychology field and is blogging and has a lot of influence where she is and is growing in it. And I feel like that she's very misled, and I don't know how to tell her because she thinks that I'm very backwards. But, for instance, I made a post, and she made a statement that was saying, well, I think this is very unreliable because this source says that it's not reliable. And she was quoting from factcheck.org. Well, in looking into factcheck.org, it seems to me that, at least in this day and time, that it is very biased. And I'm questioning if I know how to determine what's not biased and what's really just facts, and I don't know how to tell other people how to really examine what their sources are and how it may be swayed. Do you have recommendations? Yeah,
you bring up a really great point. We're living in a hashtag fake news era, right, Kerby? Like we just increasingly there's a sense that there are a variety of more sources that are available to be able to get your news. And then with the variety of more sources has this distrust that's started to kind of permeate the kind of landscape. There's a study out of Gallup that says that 68% of Americans have no trust or little trust in the media right now. And so I can make a selfish plug right now that I think that the Daily Briefing would be a place that you might be able to find news of the day. I write the Daily Briefing every morning, and so you can sign up for that at denisoforum.org, DENISON forum, FORUM.org, and just sign up there. It's on the homepage. And so what the Daily Briefing tries to do is it tries to capture articles that individuals will be talking about during the day that are driving the day, or articles that reveal the spirit of the day, articles that kind of comment on the human experience. So things such as the media statistic number of 68% of Americans don't trust the media. And so what does that say about the larger culture? And then I put little clever nicknotes, or at least I like to think they're clever, Kerby, of trying to help us think about those from a biblical perspective. If we believe it to be true that the Bible is a word to our feet, or a light to our feet and a guide for our path. But Grant, I think this brings up a really good point that I'd love to hear your perspective on. In that increasingly we're seeing millennials are turning towards social media to be able to get their news, or two, they're largely checking out of news and are not really engaging in the news cycle. Can you comment on that, or is that what you're saying?
Yeah, social media is definitely a go-to spot for news. And I would even go so far to say, I don't think that many millennials would even know about the news if news wasn't on social media, because I don't think there is as strong of a desire to know about the news. There is an apathy, I think, because it's kind of like, I think our generation watched a lot of staple things, or institutions, if you will, fall apart. And so we watched our parents really, really get involved in fighting the other side in politics, and then not seemingly get what they want. So it's like, do I want to give that level of attention to just stress out all the time and then not get the results that we want? But there's key things. For example, church is a staple thing that seeing all the disqualified pastors, and or one of my biggest questions is, if a church closes doors, would the neighborhood notice? And so with an activist generation, if they don't see that church doing that, then it's like, why am I giving so much time if we're not changing our community? Another thing would be marriage, seeing so much divorce. And then another thing would be college, seeing so much debt and not getting jobs. And so these things like the American dream, that's a huge one, I think, of seeing our parents, especially our fathers, go to work and maybe attain status but still feel empty or be lonely, and so or have money but not be present. And so I think that with the news, it's just one more thing that it's like, you gotta get involved and you gotta get connected. And again, I'm not saying this is right, I just am saying I think it's real, is that it's become an apathy even towards the news, and with the multiple options that you can choose from, and now the literal word of fake news, it almost makes it like, I almost feel the pain of this lady. Is like, how do I care? And then when I do care, where do I even go if I'm trying?
Yeah. And Kristi, are you seeing that among your among your constituency, this sense that there's an apathy towards the news, or even just a disinterest in the news?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think some of that starts for me. I even remember realizing I don't have TV, and historically, you consume news by watching TV. Like, I don't have any TV channels to be watching. I have Netflix, and they don't put the 8 o'clock news on Netflix. And so because the context of consuming news is online, a lot of times people will just simply read the headlines and not even what the article is, much less if it's a credible source, much less if the source is very biased or not. Hence the whole fake news phenomenon, more or less. So I definitely think that there can be an apathy. I also think that we are as humans, tend to be very, very self-focused. If this topic or issue doesn't affect my day-to-day, do I need to spend the time to invest my thoughts and energy into researching it? And a lot of times I think millennials opt out of that.
Yeah. So Kerby, we're starting to see individuals that, one, are not checking into the news, and two, they're looking online to the news. But even online, even not just online sources, but even fact checkers can be wrong and biased and can be untrustworthy.
And, one of the things I know that you do, and I do as well, is if I see something and I'm not sure about it, I go see if somebody's responded to it. Because by and large, fact checker and the Washington Post and New York Times and others that do some of that, Snopes and others, tend to be accurate, but not always. And so if I were saying, well, in this particular case, fact checker says that Sarah is wrong, I would then type in, okay, let me go to Newsbusters or some of the others and see if somebody has said, no, wait a minute, they are saying that that's an inaccurate statistic, and it really is. So sometimes it's back to the phrase that you and I use so often, read widely. And if you only see an article in one source, probably isn't true. If lots of people are quoting from it, probably is true. If somebody makes an outrageous claim, guess what? In this social media environment, people are going to critique it. So go look and see if you can find a critique of that, or somebody has challenged that particular statistic.
It reminds me, Kirby, a couple of weeks ago when ESPN decided to suspend Robert Lee, or decided to not let Robert Lee do the color commentary for the University of Virginia game because of the controversy. I mean, this is an individual that is no way related to Robert E. Lee. And
Asian.
And so when Kirby sent that, I literally thought, this is fake news. Somebody has made this news up. And so I started searching around like what you were talking about. But nevertheless, it does make me grateful for places like the Denison Forum as well as Point of View that really are trusted news sources. And so when we come back, we're going to continue talking about millennials, but specifically we're going to be talking about millennials in the workplace and what are those things that keep them in that particular workplace. And we'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Since 2012, First Liberty Institute has been investigating the rise in the number and severity of domestic attacks on religion. Each year, that investigation is compiled into our annual survey. We started that survey because wherever we went, people would tell us that they didn't think there was a genuine threat to religious liberty in our country. We call it Undeniable, the Survey of Religious Hostility to Religion in America. In the past year, the total number of documented attacks on religious liberty has increased by over 15%. Over the past 5 years, we have seen an alarming 133% increase. Of the 1,400 cases documented in Undeniable, you will see a myriad of faiths represented: Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and Sikh, among others. Religious hostility in America does not seem to discriminate. But there is hope. First Liberty is battling for religious freedom in court, but you can join that fight by simply educating yourself and others about the rights we each have and how we can preserve them. If you haven't yet, I'd encourage you to go to firstliberty.org today and download your copy of the 2017 edition of Undeniable, or order a free copy for your friend. Despite the mounting hostility, First Liberty is prepared to stand against these relentless attacks for as long as it takes. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Guide at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View for the last 9 minutes.
Whoa.
And Kirby, it's the last 9 minutes of the Millennial Round Table for Wednesday, September 13th. And so we're joined by Kristi Krock, Grant Skeldon, and Kerby Anderson. And Grant, I am very interested in millennials in the workplace. Grant sent me this article last night, and I'm just so interested to hear on how individuals can better understand millennials in the workplace, but also better keep millennials in their particular workplace. And so the article, which is on the Point of View website, pointofview.net. It highlights some interesting components. And so one of the things that I was just so interested in, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Grant, is this understanding that millennials are values driven.
Mm-hmm.
They're very true to their values and want to see those values expressed in what they do.
Yeah, so I have a theology of work. Millennial theology of work is that the generations before my generation were forced to choose work, even their major in college that would lead to their job, based off of provision, just providing a better life for my kids, especially those coming out of the Great Depression. And so one thing I encourage millennials to just think about, consider, realize, even thank their parents and grandparents for is that we have the luxury to choose. We have options, like just in a lot of things, but especially even in our life, in our job, we have options to not just choose a job based off of provision, but also off of passion and purpose. And so one story that I like to share just to kind of bring both worlds together is I liken the generations before us to the father in Dead Poet Society. Have you all seen that movie?
Yeah.
And so he's gotten the kid to college, and the kid it's a prep school to, I think it's a fast track to Harvard or Princeton, something like that. And the kid wants to do theater arts on his first day, and he's in the room and all that. And his dad's like, absolutely not. Come outside. Because he's like, well, Dad. And he's like, no, come outside. And he said, we have worked way too hard to get you into this school. You're going to be a doctor. I think it was a doctor or a lawyer. And the kid's kind of like, okay. And so I think that happens to a lot of kids today is their parents are like, we've worked so hard to give you this opportunity. Why don't you go and be a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse, something like that? And they want to do music or arts or something like that. And what is happening is young adults are going, I think, behind their parents' back like this kid does when they decide to choose their passion or their purpose. But helping millennials realize you have the luxury to choose your passion and your purpose because of what your parents have done. And now we can choose those things, but also helping parents realize, then help them figure out those things, because you don't want to happen what happened to that kid is he does do theater arts. He's incredible at it. And then his dad figures it out, pulls him out of that school, and the kid commits suicide. And so I would say kids they are committing more suicide than generations before. And I do think that can be a part of it. But I think that a lot of kids are my age are committing suicide of the soul because they're feeling forced to choose between passion and purpose in your work, which is where you spend most of your time, or provision. And I don't think they have to be at odds, but I do think the generations are motivated differently when they choose their jobs.
Yeah, that's really good. Kristi, what would you add to that? Are you starting to see just millennials that are largely moving towards willing to take less money in order to be able to pursue after their passion and their purpose, rather than going after that job that might be more lucrative?
Absolutely. I have a lot of close friends that are baristas at coffee shops, and I think that's like the new millennial job for somebody that's not pursuing a kind of big career, but people that are passionate about coffee or passionate about having a very relaxed schedule, so that they can do the things that they are passionate about. And a lot of times, even for people that do pursue career, will have what is commonly referred to as a side hustle. And so if they aren't able to find the passion in their main job or career, pursuing things that they do care about or can even just lead on their own in their side hustle, where they are their own CEO, sort of thing.
Yeah, there is that entrepreneurial spirit, Grant, right, within millennials to want to identify the needs in the workplace, or in the marketplace rather, and really want to put in that hustle in order to make those needs happen.
Yeah,
and it really does kind of double down on that sense that millennials want to do what they value. Like they want to make the world a better place, right?
Yeah, and I ask parents a lot, when was the last time that you showed concern to your child about how much money's in their bank account, or how much money they make for work, or the kind of job they have, or just debt, and just money-centric questions and concerns. And usually they'll laugh. They're like, oh, last week or this month, multiple times. And if I ask kids that, they'll laugh out loud, because they're like, all the time, that's the main reason they call me anymore, is because of those concerns. And that's okay, but that's a provision mindset.
Yeah.
And I think that if you also speak into their passion and their purpose, you'll start to find out your kid may not be as lazy as millennials come off as, because I think millennials aren't lazy. I think a lot of them are uninspired. They are not inspired by an American dream that leads to money but emptiness. We saw our parents come home exhausted but with status, and it just doesn't add up. Not with a generation that wants raw authenticity and community.
That goes back, Kerby, to kind of what one of your commentaries was speaking to, the sense that millennials, largely their needs are met, so it allows them to be able to pursue after those things that they're passionate about, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking the watershed might have happened in the 1960s. You've, of course, studied John F. Kennedy. Remember what he instituted? Peace Corps.
Yeah, Peace Corps.
And then you had, during the 1960s, you had a lot of individuals wanting to join a commune and not worry about finances. By the time you got to the 1960s and 70s, you had what was called the Jesus movement. You had all sorts of people going into ministry, Campus Crusade for Christ, Navigators, InterVarsity. So some of that began, and so in some respects, the watershed was between the builder generation. That generation grew up with the Great Depression and couldn't even imagine somebody joining the Peace Corps or going into ministry where you would be taking a cut in pay. And so that kind of created the environment for your generation today, where I think a lot of people looking at values. So that's sort of, I think, how it unfolded. And again, this article by Katie Zimmerman, I think, was very fair in saying, well, there have been some people in the past that have looked at values, and there are even millennials now in the current situation that sometimes have to make for provision. But it has changed the dynamic rather dramatically, and I think also illustrates why there's a lot of job hopping, because they're looking for significance, and if this job doesn't meet my need, I'm not going to stay in it and work for General Motors for 40 years like the previous generation may have done.
So this is the lightning round, okay? So I'm going to ask Grant and Kristi. So for the individuals that are listening right now that are working with millennials, what piece of advice would you give to them to try to better understand working with millennials, or maybe even keeping millennials in the workplace?
Yeah, I would say that one of the biggest things that millennials want and are looking for is they want to know that the company and the bosses that they're working for care about them as a person. We say a lot of times young adults don't care about what you know until they know that you care about them. So I would say they're looking for discipleship. They're looking for feedback. They want to know that they're cared for. And then I think it's much more natural for them to turn around and pour their hearts into their job.
That's good.
I think that whatever millennials help create, they'll help maintain. And so in a lot of jobs, they're just told what to do. And if you ask why, then they say, because I told you so. And so if they have no ownership, you're asking them to act like members and not like owners. But you can't want owner-like results with a member-like mentality and reinforcing that. And so I found that the jobs that say the world's your oyster, like we want you to elevate in this organization, we'll even mentor you, we'll help you, and loosely, like Jack Welch with General Electric, hold them loosely that you may lose a lot of great people, but if you create an environment that people hire Fortune 500 CEOs out of your company, you're only going to attract more and more great young leaders that want to fill that role. And so whenever you're just trying to diss millennials or create a culture, if you have a humorous culture of making fun of millennials, no one likes to be in an office setting where you're the butt of all jokes. And so bridge build between generations. It's never either or. Millennials are not the answer. They're not the most creative. They just have a lot of time on their hands and passion and desire to learn.
But why, Grant? Why? No, I'm just kidding.
Next show, next week.
But this has been the Millennial Round Table for September 13th, 2017. We'll encourage you to get on the pointofview.net website to be able to look up more information on these individuals as well as Kerby Anderson. And so thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.
A farmer will tell you that if you don't prepare the ground, if you never plant good seeds, don't expect a harvest. Weeds maybe, edible crop no. Achieving a positive result takes work and planning. If you're concerned about what's happening in our colleges, our marketplace, in the halls of government, let me ask, have you invested in pulling weeds and planting seeds? That's what the Truth Team at Point of View does. For decades, God has used this team to attack noxious mental weeds and to plant seeds of truth that have grown into changed lives. If you're already giving to this effort each month, we thank you. You share in the reward for what we harvest. If you're not, now is the time. $30, $65, $100. The more you invest on a regular basis, the more we'll reap together. Give online at pointofview.net or using the Point of View radio app, pointofview.net. Click at the top on Become a Monthly Partner or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform